Good Saturday afternoon and welcome to From the Halls of Justice. We are happy to have in our studio today some very special guests. First of all, I would like to thank my colleague and co-producer, Murvet Arnstein, for being here. And she's like a world traveler, so I learned so much and I live through you vicariously. So thank you for being here today. And my other friend, special guest, and someone I really admire and respect is Mr. Bill Rehwald. He is the senior partner and president of his firm, his own firm, and he has brought today a wonderful special guest to be on this show. So I would like for Mr. Rehwald, number one, to say hello to us, give us the name of your firm, and if you could introduce your guest.
I would be happy to do it. I'm William Rehwald, but Bill is my name, and I'm a lawyer, and I practice at the firm of Rehwald, Glasner, and Chalif in Woodland Hills, California. I have with me Bob Klamser. I've known Bob for over 20 years. Bob worked for me a few years back, about 1994, as a private investigator, and was very helpful. I came to learn that Bob was an international hostage negotiator, and in 1994 he was working on a case down in Bogota, Colombia, where there were 6 missionaries who had been kidnapped, and Bob somehow or another convinced me to go with him to Bogota, Colombia, and boy, I'll tell you, that was quite an experience. So I'm glad that Bob is here with us today.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
Well, tell me about being an international hostage negotiator.
Well, I began hostage negotiation in law enforcement, but in the early 80s, I was asked to help Wycliffe Bible translators after they had had a missionary named Chet Bitterman kidnapped and ultimately murdered in Colombia. And missionaries at that time and other faith-based workers were becoming the targets of terrorism around the world. And my friend worked for an organization, knew that I had some negotiation experience, asked me to come help them with the training program, and that's kind of how my involvement with international hostage negotiations began.
I see. Well.
Okay, now we're going to call you, your name is Robert Klamser, but we're going to call you Bob. Is that okay?
So. That's
okay,
great.
Thank you. Now, Bob, it says, what is CCI? I have a card here, but tell our audience what CCI is.
Crisis Consulting International is an organization. It's a nonprofit, faith-based organization that was founded when we began this work in the missionary and faith-based world. So we're a network of about 15 volunteers, all experts in our field, but who are called through their faith to serve the mission community and the global church through this little security crisis management hostage negotiation niche.
Okay, so and exactly who's on the staff? You're all police officers, or you're all professionals of some sort, or just, I can't imagine somebody just volunteering to, let me do this for free and go and risk my life. So,
well, first of all, we're all called by our faith. We're all Christians. We all feel called to ministry, but we also all have a professional background, like you said, either in law enforcement or perhaps the intelligence services, or something that lets us help faith-based organizations work in what's becoming a more and more dangerous world for them.
I think that you'd have to have a lot of faith to be a crisis negotiator, because I'd have to know Jesus to be ready to lay down my life for this. I don't know too many people who would. No.
Well, what kind of work or projects does CCI do?
We do the hostage negotiations. Those happen 2 or 3 times a year generally. Some of them go very quickly. We had our fastest case occurred in Egypt. We had 32 contacts with the kidnappers over 23 hours. Our longest case was in Colombia, lasted about 6 years. But we also do risk assessments and site surveys. We'll go out to the field, look at perhaps a school, a hospital, a clinic, an aviation program, and help organizations figure out how to operate more safely, which lets them serve a greater population in whatever country they're doing. And we also do training programs for mission organizations, humanitarian organizations, and every once in a while we get involved in disaster relief projects. We went and did a major project in Haiti right after the earthquake there.
Okay, so besides, I heard you mention Haiti and Egypt. Where else in the world has CCI worked?
We've worked pretty much all over. It's a lot of work in Africa, a lot of work in Latin America, a lot of work in the Middle East. Right now, a lot of our work's in countries you would expect: Afghanistan, Sudan, Iraq, and North Africa.
So what's the most difficult or challenging work CCI does? I know you said one case was 6 years. I can't imagine, but go ahead.
I think the most challenging work are the hostage negotiations, because it's a situation that, as it goes, how you respond to it affects the outcome. You're not coming in and trying to recover from something that's happened, but you really are shaping the outcome. And there's a tremendous amount of stress and pressure, and in some cases an awful lot of scrutiny, media scrutiny or public scrutiny on you as well.
Now, are missionaries and faith-based organizations at more risk overseas?
They're at increasing risk everywhere. One of the things about the threat of terrorism we're facing in the 21st century is that it is primarily a religious-based threat, and those who are propagating terrorism in the name of religion are attacking other faith systems and other belief systems. And that puts missionaries, it puts faith-based humanitarian workers and people like that really very much on the front lines, and in some cases literally in the crosshairs.
Okay, so what kinds of things can missionaries learn to do to be safer?
The first thing that's important for them is to develop a really good awareness of their environment, to know their environment, to know what's normal and what's not. They're working in a different culture with a different language, so there's a lot to learn, but there's a lot involved in preparation for just realizing what's a normal situation, what's not. We do a lot of training in detecting surveillance. That's the opportunity for kind of non-government targets, not the military and not businessmen, but people like missionaries and humanitarian workers. If they detect an attack during the surveillance part, the planning part, there are lots of things that they can do. So a lot of our training focuses on that. And then we have a big percentage of training that's on how to survive as a hostage, how to do things to manage the situation, to increase your chances of survival, to decrease the chances of being abused in captivity. So those are the kind of training we do.
How do you survive as a hostage?
The most important factor is first of all, not to give up, not to lose faith. The second thing is to try to find ways to develop a relationship, common ground with your captors. That's almost become a cliche in the media, but it really is true. The more you humanize yourself, you become a father, a grandfather, a son, someone who's also sharing the same physical environment, the heat, the humidity, the rain, whatever it is, with your captors. The more you become a person to them, and it's harder for them to abuse you, harder for them to kill you. So that's the primary skill.
I don't know. Now, I saw this on a movie, TV. Is it true that, so when people are kidnapped or taken, I would hear when the parents would come on television or the relative that they were told to use the victim's name because that would humanize them?
Sure.
Really?
Yeah, anything that personalizes. If I'm taken hostage, anything that makes me Bob a grandfather, a parent, not an American, an ex-policeman, anything that transfers their vision of me towards that person helps.
What was your most recent work?
The most recent case, extended case we did was in Afghanistan. It was last fall, just before Christmas. It lasted 39 days. A European aid worker and his Afghan driver were kidnapped as they were driving to the airport. Actually, he was leaving the country. And so we were involved in a 39-day negotiation to get them out.
So how many of you go to these countries? What's your staff? Is it only one person, or?
Oh no, we have, and it's really more of a network of volunteers because we all donate our time and our services to this. But in Crisis Consulting International, there are 15 people spread all around the country. So depending on what the project is or what the case is and what their availability is, kind of depends on who goes to what project.
What's the most dangerous place?
Well, right now Afghanistan is high on the list. Sudan, very high. And Yemen is a country that's becoming increasingly dangerous, but Afghanistan sure on the top of the list right now.
Are there other institutions that you work with?
Depending on the case, we try to partner with as many organizations as possible. Sometimes the host government is a partner, sometimes they're an adversary, depending on the country. Sometimes the government of citizenship of the victim can be helpful. And then there are sometimes the UN can be involved, other organizations such as the Red Cross. So there's a multitude of agencies out there, non-governmental organizations and governments. And depending on the facts of the case, you try to partner with as many as you can.
So is the threat of terrorism in the U.S. increasing?
I think so. Every conference that I attend, every meeting that I attend involves a lot of concern that there's still a very high degree of interest in what was Al-Qaeda, which is now a network, a franchise of organizations in attacks here within the U.S. So I think everybody in the industry feels that that's still a very significant threat, especially with the 10-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks approaching.
Are you crying?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I just.
No, I have a condition that my eyes water.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say, oh my God, what are you thinking?
No,
I don't want to cry. Okay. Oh my God, I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Wanda.
All right, you're welcome. I'm sorry. Okay. Since 9/11, and well, we talked about that, but since 9/11 and in the areas, has there been more events that we should be talking about or focusing on?
Well, I think 9/11 was obviously a huge benchmark, but it wasn't the beginning of this phase of terrorism. It wasn't anywhere near that. But pulling off an attack in the U.S., in the homeland here, created an awful lot of changes, and it created an environment for organizations to grow, to mimic Al-Qaeda, to be inspired to follow the teachings of bin Laden and others like him. It showed an apparent vulnerability that there's always going to be in free society. There's always going to be more vulnerability in free society than closed society. But it was definitely an inspirational attack, and the threat is very much still present.
How did you get Bill to go to Bo-Katan? Is that where he was with you? I mean, I just think that this is amazing. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, that was Bill's first time serving on the board of our organization. He's back on now, and wanted to get him out in the field and see what we did. And I think we did a training program down there, and I think we actually used you as a role player a little bit and did some training. And Bogota is a beautiful city, and Colombia is a beautiful country. At the time, it was really in the throes of its most difficult challenges as a free country, but it's a great place. Bill had a great time.
I had a great time. Yeah.
So you went down there for hostage negotiations, and you had a great time. I'm about to cry. Okay. I need you to explain this to me.
I think part of the missing of the piece there is that the particular trip that I went on was really more training, and really what it was is I can sit there and recall this 17 years later. So, but he was really trying to tell the missionaries, look, you've got to be aware of the circumstances you're in. You've got to be aware that that car broken down on the side of the road may be a trap to pull you aside and kidnap you. Mm-hmm. And so it was all about being aware of your surrounding circumstances, which I think in reality that's what we all need to do to be safe in our own environment, in our own areas. But it's particularly important when you're in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. And for our our citizenry. I mean, you know, not everybody's a missionary, but I mean, the statistics are that probably about 60% of our college-age kids who go to college will probably spend time in a foreign country. They need to know about what the risks are and what they need to do in order to survive for just being a college kid. And a lot of these college kids, they don't think. They're 19, 20 years old, and we're just shoving them out the door to go get an experience in a foreign land. I think we need to be thinking about that pretty seriously.
I.e. Amanda Knox?
Amanda Knox. You know, that's always on my radar.
That was very, very interesting, and we have a show coming up about that. Now, I want to touch a little bit more on your background as a law enforcement officer and how you became involved with it. I know it's faith-based, but touch a little bit more on that, because I think that's intriguing. And the fact that you don't get paid for this.
Right.
People should know this. I think that's amazing and a blessing, because it takes a lot of time. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in a law enforcement family. My father was in law enforcement, so I went into it. My wife is a law enforcement, or is a retired law enforcement officer. She actually survived longer than I did. She Lynn did 30 years in the Ventura Police Department. So we're a law enforcement family. Exactly. But I learned the art of hostage negotiation as a police officer. So I was doing that in the domestic law enforcement setting when these other events began happening to missionaries. And I had friends who were missionaries, and they said, "Oh well, we'll put these two together and see if there was something that I could offer." And then that led to what's now been 25 years of personal ministry.
And there's no fee for this?
No, no.
How do people get in touch with you?
Well, we do training programs and different things like that, so people do know about us. I think we're fairly well known in the mission community. But people of faith contribute to that faith. I mean, that's what our faith teaches us to do. And some are gifted in certain areas. I would not know how to build a Sunday school and would not be a good Sunday school teacher. This is one little thing that I can do, though, that advances my faith and lets me contribute back to my faith.
You know, this is amazing. So could you imagine me calling Murvet going, "Murvet, what you doing? Can you get on a plane and go with me to Turkey to help me talk somebody out of this hut?" I mean, I just think it's fabulous.
It is fabulous.
Well, it's one of those things that that if you're equipped to do, and you say yes, it's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I've met incredible people all over the world, and one of the real privileges I've been seeing a lot of the world. Like Bill said, I think it's really important that college students go out. I mean, all my kids have seen other parts of the world now, but we can get a very narrow perspective of what the world is like if we just stay here in the U.S. or in Southern California, and that's been a real privilege and blessing for me.
Okay, go ahead, Murvet.
So you talk about teaching kids to be more aware of where they are going, what they are doing. How would you do that? Is it something that they should take a class, or should be taught in the family?
Well, I think it depends. You mentioned kids. What age?
Kids, but
teenagers. Teenagers, college students. When I talk to universities or colleges about sending students abroad, we just very openly talk about it. There are risks, there are dangers. There are risks and dangers here. I mean, we have the threat of earthquakes, we have fires, we have crime, we have traffic, but we're used to those. We get used to them as we grow up, we get used to them over time. When you go into a different culture, you don't know maybe even what the risks are, you don't know what the cues and the warning signs are. So what we talk about is paying attention, not just concentrating on your own little world of you and your luggage, perhaps, but paying attention to the environment, what's going on around you, what are people doing, what are people doing that looks comfortable and normal, when do people look alarmed and cautious, and taking their cues and learning what the environment's about, learning what the risks are. Very simple things like arriving at an airport in a country that you don't know anything about. It's very easy to find out how the taxi system works. And in some places it's fine to go outside an airport and pick a taxi, and in other places you would never do that. You would arrange for a taxi inside the airport. But you've got to know which is which ahead of time. So there's some thinking and planning that has to go into it. That's the awareness part.
Yeah. I've traveled a lot since I was a kid, teenager I should say, and I've taken some, now thinking about it, thank goodness nothing happened, but I've done some stupid things, I should say.
Well, most of the time it's not stupid. Most of the time we just don't know. We just don't know, and we learn.
So how do you learn? I mean, is it something that, you know, I'm a member of AAA or something, do you go and you ask your travel agent or somebody, what do I do to get a taxi, or what should I do?
Actually, the simplest place to look is on the State Department website. Travel.state.gov has a tremendous amount of information about traveling and all these basic things. So if you're traveling on business or tourism and going into areas that are commonly visited by foreigners, that's a great place to start. If you're going to be working in a remote environment, a village, a tribal environment, then you need some more training at a higher level. The kind of thing we do, but there's lots of companies that do it as well.
Wow. I need some more heart to do what you do. Now there's a clip that we couldn't set up, unfortunately, but it shows that your work that you were doing in Haiti. Tell us a little bit about that.
We had quite a bit of experience in Haiti. There had been a spike in 2007 of kidnappings of the children of missionaries.
Wow.
In Port-au-Prince. There had been 7 children kidnapped within about a 6-week period. So we went down and worked with the entire missionary community, helped them establish a working group, do some risk assessment and some security principles, and establish a pretty strong relationship there. When the earthquake happened, one of the organizations we'd worked with operated a seminary in Port-au-Prince on about 15 acres. And that seminary site, even though it was heavily damaged, there were casualties on the campus, became a refugee camp. People flooded into it. And we were called and asked if we would come down and help set up the security for that. Actually, when we got there, we ended up taking a larger role in helping them set up how to operate a refugee camp, how to interact with the UN, how to interact with all the aid agencies. Help them get up and get the camp up and running, get water and food, and get a medical clinic going and things like that. So had an opportunity to contribute there as well.
Now, Bill, give me some input on this. I'm just really fascinated that he got you to get on a plane to go and participate in this. You've got a nice office, so I just can't believe that. But tell us a little bit about your input in this.
Well, obviously, you know, when you interact with somebody and then you hear about hostage negotiation, it sort of becomes attractive to you. And so I wanted the adventure of going out and traveling, and so I took a chance and got on an airplane with Bob and had a great time. And Bogota is not the only place I've been. I've been to other places, not as many as I'd like to be, but
where else did you go?
Well, I've been to Uganda. I was over in Yugoslavia right after the war. Was over there, and so I've been to a few places.
Men find the darndest things attractive. You know, I've been single all this time, and I'd like to get a husband. Only thing I got to do is go get arrested or something in Bogota, Uganda, something. I mean, you know, do they have a Nordstrom's over there? I don't know.
I'm sure they do.
Okay. Well, okay, we've got about 4 minutes or 3 minutes. On a serious note, is there anything that the average person can do about the threat of terrorism, really?
Well, I think so. I think, and just focusing here in the U.S., I think we do face a threat, and I think as time goes by without events, we don't realize how many attacks have been disrupted. The government can't tell us about all of them. Some we do hear about. Some just fail. But being aware, reporting things that are suspicious. I mean, we all have instincts. I believe instincts are really, more than anything else, a gift from God to protect us. And when we train people, we train them to really trust their instincts. And the idea of taking responsibility for whether it's your home, your neighborhood, your workplace, where your kids play soccer or baseball or whatever, and if things aren't right, if something isn't right, if there is something suspicious, like Bill mentioned, you know, the car that doesn't belong there, the person hanging around or taking pictures or asking inappropriate questions, reporting those simple things. It sounds so easy, it sounds so simple, but that's where many of these events are discovered and disrupted.
So
I'm sorry. No, you report to. Say you see something.
To local law enforcement, just to your local law enforcement. Just in the U.S., just 911.
911.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you distinguish if they're inappropriate questions and somebody's just not being friendly? I mean, are we talking about the U.S.? Are we talking about in another country? I mean, you know, because if you're in another country, I'm sure you're thinking, well, I don't want to be rude. Maybe I need to tell them where I'm, you know, so what would be inappropriate?
Well, almost anything that's asking for personal information or personal knowledge, that's off limits everywhere.
Okay.
You know, somebody calls you, comes up in the street and you know, wants to know where your hotel is, or, you know, no, you don't, there's no reason for that.
Really?
But around here, you know, at home, remember, you're the subject matter expert. You know what's normal. You know what's normal in your neighborhood. You know who lives around here. You know what it's like at the grocery store. And when people are trying to pry information out of you for ulterior motives, they're on edge. They're nervous, and their behavior will tend to give them away. And that's where your instincts come in. And you know, maybe not everyone you're going to dial 911 on, but sometimes you're just going to say no and walk away.
Okay, my cute little story. At one point, I lived in a part of the city, and I would get up very early to go exercise. And I got up to go exercise, and there was a flight attendant who lived in our building. And I saw this gentleman in her car, and he looked like, you know, he was cleaning out the car and everything. And it was a friendly building, so I walked by, good morning, and he said, good morning. And I was like, oh, great. And I went off and I exercised. And about 3 o'clock that afternoon, I saw her, and the police were out there, and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, I don't know. Someone broke into my car. I said, oh, they broke into your car? She said, yes. I said, oh, I saw a gentleman this morning who looked like he was cleaning it. Oh, so see, I didn't realize, he was a very nice young man, and he spoke, and he was very kind, and he didn't bother me at all, and I wasn't scared. So I guess they were breaking into the car.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and I didn't realize they were breaking into the car. I just thought they were cleaning it out. So,
they cleaned it out.
Yeah, they cleaned it out. No. So I guess instincts weren't working that well that morning. It was just a nice morning. So anyway, these are things we should be aware of. So we're wrapping this up. Thank you so much. Once again, you're an international hostage negotiator.
Yes.
I think it's fabulous, Mr. Rehwald. Thank you so much for bringing these guests to our show.
Thank you
Thank
for
you for
coming
having
to
me.
our show.
And for no pay. I think that you
Amazing.
It's totally amazing. Thank God for you. Thank you for joining us on From the Halls of Justice. Please tune in next week where we'll have another fabulous guest. We're going to be talking about the Amanda Knox situation. Thank you very much. Join us next week.